Friends, request all of you to take your respective seats and we move forward. We have very interesting session, that is workshop 4, coming our way. Request all friends to get seated, please. Or boss?
Let's get going.
Yeah. So we have a very interesting session lined up and coming up our way. That's workshop 4. We do have the body checkups and health checkups at regular intervals for ourselves, our own. But then the same thing, why not to be done for our auto dealerships as well? So we have the industry veteran, Mr. Hemal Thakkar, the senior practice leader and director, consulting CRISIL marketing intelligence and analytics, available among us. And I would request Mr. Hemal Thakkar to carry forward the session, please. Thank you. The stage is all yours, Hemal bhai.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I don't think there could have been a better time to host this session after, the Gen X panel that we've had. The discussion that was happening in that panel is actually a good segue to get into this presentation. So before getting into, the dealer health check part, I will just take you through a few slides, which will give you a flavor of the industry and how the industry is shaped up over the last couple of years. And I will only stick to a few points. I'll circulate this presentation to all of you. So, please don't make notes or, don't take photographs. You can take photographs if you want, but I'll share this presentation with you so you can access it. It will be available with Saharsh and the entire team of FADA. If you actually look at the passenger vehicle industry, there are two trends that have shaped up the industry in the last couple of years. One, the share of SUVs has increased substantially as compared to what it was 5 years ago. And the share of small cars has gone down. There are many reasons for it, including emission norms, costs increasing at a significant pace, and incomes not keeping pace with it. And if you see, the share of SUVs has gone up. And within SUVs also, if you see, the share of compact SUV, mid-size SUV, and large SUV has largely remained same. So the structure within SUVs has not changed. But if you actually see, the structure of the overall industry has changed, where we've seen the SUV share going up. Second, what is also important is if you look at the powertrain mix, you will see that CNG has gained significant share as compared to, the other fuels in the last 4 to 5 years. And we've seen electrification catch up to about 2.5%. Strong hybrids have come in, but they are still about 1.8%, which is relatively lower as compared to electric vehicles at this point of time. And the amount of launches that we've seen in the EV space in the last day or so, you will actually see this penetration going up significantly in the next 1 year. We are expecting this industry to grow at about 5 to 6% CAGR over the next 5 to 6 years, largely driven by new model launches, premiumization, increase in disposable incomes, as our GDP is expected to grow by about 6.7 to 6.8%, being the fastest growing economy in the world. Now, when we look at the next segment, that is two-wheelers. Now, what is important is if you look at the two-wheeler segment, again, you see that the overall industry, motorcycles have been at about 62 to 63% for a long period of time. And similarly, scooters have been at about 34-35%. But within motorcycles, like in passenger vehicles, what is important is the commuter segment has shrunk significantly. It's come down from about 56% to about 47% as on date. And 125cc segment has seen a rise, and so has the premium cc segment. Similarly, in scooters, if you see, the share of 125cc segment has gone up. Also, if you look at the powertrain mix, you are seeing the share of EVs go up significantly to about 5.5% as on date. And if you look at it from scooters perspective, we are at about 15% of overall sales. We expect this industry to grow at about 7 to 8% over the next couple of years. But what is important is we expect about 35 to 40% electrification in the overall two-wheeler industry over by the end of this decade or by FY31. And in case of scooters, it is going to be as high as 70%. So from that perspective, the discussion that was happening in the earlier panel, that electrification is a trend which is unavoidable, and we'll have to adapt ourselves to ensure that we make our dealerships healthy and profitable by moving towards electrification going forward. On the commercial vehicle side, if you actually see what has happened is, in terms of volume, small commercial vehicles have come down. But what is also important is, or even if you see, the share of heavy commercial vehicles has come down. But what is very important is, in both these segments, if we look at the small commercial vehicle segment, which is largely, your Tata Ace category, as well as, your pickup category, largely, the ULCV part is relatively lower. What we've seen is that there has been an increase in the 2 to 3.5 ton category in terms of volumes, with models like Intra, Dost Plus, etc. coming in, which has expanded the category from erstwhile Bolero. And there has been migration from Tata Ace segment to that segment also. So which has also in a way led to shrinking of the above pie, but the volumes have come down. Because of COVID, you actually saw the IMCV segment go up because last mile mobility went up substantially. And because of which, if you actually see, the trends are changing. HCV volume share has come down, but tonnage share has gone up significantly because we are seeing launches at the higher end of the tonnage. What is very important is if you actually look at the powertrain mix, electrification is very, very low at about 0.8%. But what is very important is in buses, it is at about 6.5%, thanks to, the PM e-bus Seva, which is now undergoing, and FAME 2 scheme, under which most of the STU fleet will have to be replaced over the next couple of years. So we are expecting this demand to stay robust. Apart from this, the small commercial vehicle segments, that is the last mile delivery segment, will also see significant electrification over the next couple of years. We are expecting a 3 to 5% CAGR, for the CV industry from 24 to 29. The CAGR seems to be low in terms of percentage, but what is important is if I flip this and if I put this in terms of tonnage growth, this will easily be in the range of about 7 to 8%, which is a substantial increase. But what is happening is, since tonnage mix is changing, we are actually seeing the volume growth being relatively lower. And at the same time, the value growth will also be substantially higher because we will see higher value being realized with every higher tonnage vehicle being sold. Again, we are expecting 12 to 16% electrification in the small commercial vehicle segment. That's not in CVs, it's in the small commercial vehicle segment. And about 15 to 20% electrification in the buses segment by financial year 30. Looking at three-wheelers, if you actually see, this segment has been relatively very, very stable, except, during COVID times when we saw a significant drop in terms of volumes, but this has come back very strongly. And this is one segment where we have seen significant increase in electrification, both two-wheelers and three-wheelers, because of better cost economics that they offer. They have actually seen electrification spur significantly. We are at about 17% electrification in three-wheeler L5 category, which is phenomenal. My personal view is, if you look at the total cost of ownership, even if the government post PME drive does not extend the incentives for, say, a segment like three-wheelers, it is already viable. The reason being, it is used for commercial deployment. Wherever you sweat the asset more, especially with respect to EVs, you will actually see better returns or better ROI. Even in this segment, we expect the growth to be about 5 to 6% in terms of volumes, largely driven by replacement, especially on the passenger category. And when we look at the electrification share, we are expecting it to be about 40% by financial year 30. Tractors is another segment, where we've seen one trend playing out. The share of 40 to 50 HP has gone up to more than 60%. What is driving this growth? One is, actually, if you see, if I may use a very crude word, powerization in the tractor segment, which means lot of implements are used to improve productivity, and 40 to 50 HPC is one of the best, combinations from an implement connection perspective to ensure that, most of the things get mechanized, and mechanization is something, which has been driving this significantly. We expect this segment also to grow by about 5 to 6% CAGR over the next 5 years. Now, this is one segment. Before getting into, what are the typical things that you should be looking at to improve your profitability, I'll just touch upon a few things, which is basis the financials which are filed by leading dealerships in India. And, we've tried to synthesize, or we've tried to make some sense out of it. If you actually see this, you will see that the typical return on capital employed for a two-wheeler dealer has been in the range of about 15 to 20%. There is a little bit of differentiation, across regions, but it's largely been there. If you look at the passenger vehicle category, it's been a little lower in the range of about 12 to 13%. If you look at the commercial vehicle category, again, very similar to PVs, about 10 to 12 or 10 to 13%. And when you look at conglomerates, so what I mean by conglomerates is who have more than one dealership or more than one vehicle segment under their umbrella, we are actually seeing that the ROC is relatively good, about 14 to 15%, as they are able to manage a lot of efficiencies. If you look at operating income to gross block, this is another, kind of metric that we look at very, very closely. Now, this gives you a sense of, the kind of turnover you are able to generate with the investment that you are making in the dealership. If you actually see, it's the best for two-wheelers. It's about 40 to 50% of the gross block, for that matter, because volumes are high and realization is very faster. So the turnaround is much faster. I am sure this will get better over a period of time, because two-wheelers, unfortunately, over the last 2 to 3 years, have seen a rundown in terms of sales, especially this is FY24 data. FY24 has been probably one of the better years, and FY25 is relatively more better than FY24 till date. So from that perspective, the coming year will make this metric look even better. But if you look at certain segments like PV and CV, it's in the 10 to 20% range. And similarly, in the conglomerate side, it's in the range of about 15 to 20% for that matter. Sure. No, this is actual financials filed by dealerships with ROC. Yeah. This is the actual income derived by the dealership in comparison to the investments that they have made. So gross block. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Right. So they are actually getting better returns as compared to, see, what is also very important is when you look at gross block, there are too many things that come in. And in the dealership, the most important element that goes into your gross block will be, the space or the showroom or the land price that is there. So if you see, that will be relatively lower in East as compared to the other geographies. So your gross block will be relatively lower. And, your operating income will look relatively better, when you look at the ratio put together. Similarly, when we look at, your EBITDA to interest or finance charges, if you actually see in a passenger vehicle dealership, you are probably the best place. It is about 7 to 9 times. So your PBIT as compared PBDIT or the OPBDIT, if I have to say it in that way, the margin, operating margin that you are making as compared to the finance or interest charge that you are paying is about 7 to 9 times. In case of two-wheelers, it's about 3 to 4 times. In case of CVs, it's really tight, about 1.5 to 2 times. And in case of conglomerates, again, it is in the range of 2 to 4, depending on, the categories that you are selling. Now, if you look at the leverage, and when you look at debt to equity, now if you see the leverage in CV dealerships is significantly higher as compared to, two-wheelers and passenger vehicle. Now, there is one more reason for it. If you look at the quantum investments that have to be made for a CV dealer as compared to, a PV dealer or a two-wheeler dealer, they are very different. Okay. And that is one of the key reasons, why you will see that, the leverage or the debt to equity for a CV dealer is relatively higher as compared to, other sectors or other segments of dealership. And again, when you look at debt to equity by region, you will see, kind of disparities between each region, depending on some specific components, that may be a part of the overall debt or overall equity structuring. Sorry. Again, when we look at, just one second. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, again, when we look at debt to income by region, you will see that, in case of CVs, it's relatively higher, but here it is not as bad as what it is, kind of visible in debt to equity. So what is very important is, if you see CVs is making relatively lower money when you look at taking debt from the market in comparison to what a two-wheeler guy or a passenger vehicle guy is able to leverage. So he is able to churn it much faster, repay it much faster. And hence you see that in conglomerates also, you will see that the ratio is relatively better as compared to what you have only in CVs for that matter. If you actually see in terms of profit margins, this is both, your operating profit as well as net profit. If you see PVs again, are relatively better at about 3.3%. And in case of net margins, it is 1.2, CVs at 2.4 and 0.7, and conglomerates are at about 2% and 1%. Now, this is typically, in case where most of the dealerships have, kind of land which is leased and where rent is a very big component. If you actually add that back, you will see this, kind of margin go up substantially by about 6 to 7 percentage points at least. So from that perspective, you will see that if you have your own premise, you will possibly make better returns as compared to what you're doing in this. Now this is when we say leverage and solvency metrics. So if you actually see what is the outstanding liabilities of the dealership to the net worth. Again, here you will see two-wheelers and CVs is largely similar. So what is very important is for every CV that you sell, the quantum that you generate is relatively higher than what you would do for a two-wheeler or a PV. And hence, despite debt to income being higher in, kind of CVs or debt to equity being higher in CVs, if you actually look at the outstanding liabilities to net worth, it is very similar, to other segments that you are actually looking at. And, it doesn't seem to be obscene when you look at CVs from that perspective. And again, when we look at liquidity profile of PVs and two-wheeler dealerships, you will actually see that, in terms of cash conversion cycle, the two-wheeler dealerships are probably the best, with about 50 days, passenger vehicles with about 60 days, your commercial vehicles with about 65 days, and conglomerates is at about 53 or 54 days. And similarly, we've tried to give a sense of the current ratio and gross current asset days below. So if you actually see a two-wheeler's current ratio is typically far better as compared to, other dealerships that are there. Now coming to, the cusp of the discussion that we want to have today. Now, ways to achieve financial prudence. Now, what we've tried to outline is there are three ways in which you could do this. One is sales and marketing efficiency, which means, you will have to improve your sales funnel conversion. Second is get more inquiries. Now, how do you do that? I'll come to it in a while. Second is improving service efficiency, which means improve your service retention and at the same time increase revenue per service. And third is operational efficiency. Now, how would you do this? Optimize your expense, look at your working capital, optimize your manpower. That could be in terms of productivity, that could be in terms of mix of contractual versus on-roll, or could be in terms of skilled versus unskilled. And basis all this, when you analyze your dealership, you will be in a much better position to earn better output out of the input that you are putting into a dealership. So let's look at the first point, which is sales efficiency. Now, what do we do in this? Now, this is something, which is very basic and everybody does this. Looking at how the conversion rate from inquiry all the way to retail is. People look at inquiry to test drive ratio, test drive to booking ratio, and booking to retail ratio. So everybody looks at this ETBR, and I'm sure all OEMs train dealers to look at this very, very closely. What is also important is, now with the next gen also being in business and they being far more digital savvy, I think they need to use a lot of, or they need to derive a lot of insights by digging a little deeper into the data or information they collect. Now, how can they do this? If you look at the inquiries, there are several ways of generating inquiries, whether it is a walk-in, whether it is through their own website, whether it is through social media channels, whether it is through telephonic, or whether it is event-based, And for each inquiry source, you need to basically look at what is the ETBR. It should not be at an overall level, but at the source level. Then you will actually come to know where is the actual challenge or where is the actual problem. So you will then come to know, is my sales team solely dependent on walk-ins, or are they putting in converting leads from other resources also? So is it that what is contributing to kind of relatively lower conversion at your end, and what could improvise your conversion is something that will be something which you will come to know about it. Again, you will also get answers to certain things, that am I converting most of my customers post test drive? If not, why? You need to do a loss sale analysis as to why is it that a customer, despite taking a test drive, has not taken your vehicle. And you actually need to document the right kind of reasons. If you don't do that in a proper manner, you will not be in a position to understand why are you losing your customers. Because you are actually going to put in that kind of effort, that kind of money to get that customer to you, or those kind of resources which will help you bring that customer to your dealership. But what is important is conversion of this. Then you will also have to look at salesperson efficiency. So what is the number of test drives he is given? What are the follow-ups that he is doing per inquiry? And whether you are doing loss sale analysis salesperson wise. Now this is also something very, very critical. You will have to find out that is your sales team giving enough test drives to the inquiries that are generated. Because many a times, the sales team will say that, there is an inquiry and they will sit on it for a long period of time. But to generate interest, you will have to ensure that they also give test drives to, your prospective customers or the ones who have done inquiries with you. Why are inquiries getting dropped after 2 to 3 follow-ups? This is another thing that you need to understand. Today, the customer is having access to, kind of various channels of, kind of communication. They go to a car wale, they will look at, several vehicles, they'll compare. Before coming to the dealership itself, they would have made their mind that I want to purchase this vehicle, which makes things even more difficult for you guys. So from that perspective, it is going to be very, very important that you look at all these parameters very, very closely. Second is, marketing efficiency. Now, how do you do this? If you actually see, most of the dealerships do a lot of BTL activities. Now, what do? What is important is whether you are doing these activities at the right place, at the right time, and you are displaying it in the right way. And after doing these BTL activities, there will be certain inquiries that will get generated, which will be event-based inquiries because of the BTL activities that you have done. You should not be tracking these inquiries, with the others that you are doing. You should treat it like any other normal inquiry. You should not treat it as if, it's an ad hoc inquiry which has come in because of the BTL activities that we do. Because most of the times what we've seen is it gets lost despite putting in the money for doing BTL activities. So this is going to be extremely critical. Second, cold inquiries and leads database. Now this is something, which is again very critical, that you need to maintain a database of people who have inquired with you, despite that not being converted. And you will have to reach out to them on a very regular basis with respect to, different channels of communication. Today, the customer is very savvy, with respect to WhatsApp. We saw the gentleman from Meta, talking in the morning, stating that WhatsApp has been one of the most, favorable sources of communication that today's Gen Z is actually accepting, because he can access it when he wants, and at the same time it can be very responsive. We've seen a lot of dealerships also offering things like booking a service through a chat bot on WhatsApp. So from that perspective, this is something which is very, very important. Your discounts, promotion schemes, etc., despite they not being your customers, but they being your prospects or probable customers, so you need to be in constant touch or communication with them. Third is, the inquiries that are generated through third party and website leads. So there, how do you do it? Because these customers, as I said, are very, very tech savvy. So keeping in constant touch with them is going to be extremely important. But while doing this, what is important is when you do BTL activities, or when you undertake any kind of marketing campaign, you are actually going to spend money on it. So what is very important is what is the kind of returns you are getting by spending that money is something that you need to track very, very closely. And you need to track as to what are the kind of new inquiries that are getting generated, what is it that is getting converted at the end of the day. So you will come to know the marketing spends per customer or marketing spends per inquiry that you've generated. And you will also come to know that when you look at the inquiries generated through this, is your staff actually biased towards handling this inquiries in a particular manner in comparison to the other inquiries that are being generated. Service efficiency. Now, what is very important? In case of service efficiency, this is the most important part because most of you make a lot of money from service in a way, or the margins are relatively better when it comes to service. So what is something that you need to track? One, when someone buys a new vehicle, initial part, it's a case where there will be an extended warranty and they may take up AMCs, after the first or second year. So they may visit the dealership more frequently till the time they actually want to resell the vehicle and purchase a new vehicle. So from that perspective, how is the first service impression? Has the customer experience been good? Will he actually visit that dealership? Will he recommend this dealership to someone else? That is something, which is very, very important. You need to have your telecalling team or the WhatsApp team, kind of reach out to them, ask them to give a feedback. Most of the times I have seen that, the dealership executive will come while he delivers the car. He will ask you to sign on a paper which has a rating of 1 to 10, in which the customer will unfortunately not mark anything, and the dealership at his end will mark 10 and, it will show that, the customer is really satisfied. So in order to make this more transparent, better to digitize this process, where you actually send a link to the customer, where he himself will fill it and himself will give the rating. And if need be, you can break it down into a couple of parameters, wherein you will actually come to know what has led to the satisfaction of the customer or what is something that is bothering the customer. At times, it may be a case that there may be certain very minor issues, which when plugged will lead to significant inflow in terms of service. Because what is happening today is the density of dealerships in a particular town has gone up significantly as compared to earlier. So dealerships are in a way competing with one another. And service is a significant source of revenue. So despite me having bought my vehicle from a particular A dealership, if the same brand offers, the dealership at some other location with a pickup drop facility, but my experience there has been better, I would not mind switching. So this is something, which is very, very important, especially from today's perspective. Then increasing revenue per service. Now this is also very, very critical and important. Now AMCs is one traditional way of doing it. Other is, today you can also look at accessories, which is a significant source of revenue. And this has not become a significant source of revenue only in new dealerships, but also in pre-owned dealerships. But unfortunately, many of us don't focus too much on the pre-owned part or selling accessories to pre-owned, person. But if you actually see, at the end of the day, he is an aspirational customer. And accessories give you far better margin as compared to, what you would get in terms of sales. So from that perspective, it is very, very important to focus on it. Second is, of course, sales and insurance payout, which most of you kind of generate. What is very important is in terms of value-added services, kind of conversion, roadside assistance, and paint protection, etc. These are other avenues, to kind of generate revenue or generate better margins, for a service line as compared to what you do on a regular basis. Proactive part replacements, when there is wear and tear, you educate the customer, you tell him. So I'm not telling that we fleece the customers, but this will give us better opportunities. We'll also ensure that the vehicles are in roadworthy conditions and are more safer. There are certain prescribed norms by OEMs, wherein there has to be a certain frequency at which engine oil has to be changed, gear oil has to be changed, coolant has to be changed, brake pads have to be changed. Many times a customer would say, aaj mat kijiye, mera gaadi zyada chalta nahi hai. But at the end of the day, maybe from a brake pad perspective, that's still fine. But when it comes to oil, you need to, explain to him, or you need to make him understand why is it important for him to change. If he does not do so, the performance of his vehicle will get hampered. The mileage will go down. So those kind of things is something that you will be in a position to push and get better output out of it. So your works manager or your works advisor, whether he is doing this on an ongoing basis or not, is something which is very, very critical for you to understand. And then measuring, the workshop productivity on an ongoing basis. That is something, which is very, very important. So at one time you will look at, looking at customer experience, and at the second time you will also look at maintaining the productivity of the dealership. Now I'll just skip this slide. This is because we are running out of time. This is basically more like out of whatever I have spoken as of now, how to achieve operational efficiency. But I'll go to the last slide, which is very, very critical. One is from a working capital management perspective. So here again, what is important is, you need to keep a check of whatever is your outstanding in terms of payments to banks and other financial institutions, and what is it that you generate in terms of retails on a daily basis, and how is the payment cycle working. I have actually seen a lot of, the current generation dealerships which have been there for ages. The dealer principal will have a small paper on his desk wherein it is written, various bank names, against that outstanding would be written, and they would write how many days outstanding and when is it that they need to pay. Now the next gen can carry this legacy forward by digitizing it and, in a way monitoring this on a consistent basis, ensuring that your finance team is aligned to it, because at the end of the day you will end up paying interest cost on it. Second, with respect to manpower optimization, again, you will have to understand what is the optimal mix of on-roll versus off-roll employees. At the same time, what is important is you will also have to define performance metrics for each of the employee, right from the receptionist to the back-end team, and both differently for showroom as well as workshop. So from that perspective, if you ask me, unfortunately, most of the dealerships in India would run it in a way that they would look at sales as the primary driver, but they do not get into something which is deeper than that. And that is where, it is very, very important, and hence getting into detailing and nitty-gritties becomes very, very important. So I think, that was it, what I wanted to present today. If there are any questions, would be happy to have it, and I'm really sorry if I have offshot my time. Yeah, sir. Right. Right. So I would say one is PBDIT to finance charges. That is one of the most important thing, because that will, let you know whether you are equipped to repay your, financial obligations on time or not. And second would be outside liabilities to net worth. So this will also help you understand whether you are actually eroding your net worth or you are actually generating enough cash out of your business to keep your business viable going forward. I think if you look at these two very, very closely, I think, it's going to be very, very, it will help you manage your dealership better. One more thing which, typically does not get published, in public domain, and hence was not a part of my presentation, but you will have to also keep a, very close eye on the kind of margins that you're making in sales versus service, which you will have access to, and which generally they do not publish, on ROC. So these are three things, which you need to take care of very, very closely.
Regarding the profit margin, this net profit of 1.2, is that profit after tax?
Yeah, it's net profit is profit after tax.
And if I take a investor hat and not as a automobile dealership hat, then how does this compare? Is this 1.2% or 1.5% that net profit? How does it compare to other MSME industry or other industries? Is this a favorable, I mean, if we didn't have this background, is this a favorable industry from a financial perspective to invest in?
So if you ask me, if you look at dealerships globally, they will be very, very similar, in terms of bottom line. As I said, the biggest investment in a dealership today is going to be opening a showroom and, whether the land belongs to yourself or land belongs to someone else. So from that perspective, if you have access to, basic stuff like having your own land, having your own premises, this metric would look relatively much better as compared to what it is looking today.
Follow-on question, I know it's very subjective, but would it make sense to invest in the land? Even if the returns on the land are not commensurate to what you will get if I just buy and lease it out, does it make sense to do that as a future-proofing of the business?
In a way, if you ask me, people always say that land is an appreciating asset. I would not deny that. But at the same time, what is also very important to understand is that your lease rentals are also going to increase on an ongoing basis. And they'll increase possibly or probably at a faster rate as compared to, your land prices. And at the end of the day, if you are invested in your own land, you don't have to take headache or issues of, kind of increase in rental prices or, prices going up, in your vicinity or nearby areas. And that will in a way give you a better competitive edge as compared to your competitors also. Because you may be able to price in a lot more things more better. So what I mean by that is maybe the kind of schemes or the kind of ATL, BTL spend that a dealership does. If you have your own premise as compared to someone who's running a rented one, will be relatively more better or will yield a better output as compared to what you would do in case of having a lease land.
Thank you very much, Hemal bhai, for your detailed analysis, valuable inputs, and I'm sure that the entire dealer fraternity as a whole is going to be benefited. There is a small token of appreciation from FADA, which I would like to present to you.
Hi all, the lunch has been served.
Lunch has been served. I request all FADA members and delegates to gather in the main hall post lunch at 2:25 for the next session. Thank you.